deployed to Afghanistan in 2012, I remember thinking a large part of my job was already done, and that was to develop the team that could fight and win in small unit combat in Afghanistan. And why do we do this? That's our comfort zone. We know how to do it. We felt good when we were doing it. So instead of embracing new things that your people require from you or expect out of you, you fall back and do your own job. And as a leader, you got to take it a little bit further than that. You got to pay attention to the example that you're setting for people, and it's important for them to see you doing things the right way. The next thing we do when we're moving backward is we shift away from coaching and guiding people, and we shift back into inspecting and directing. And that your involvement in what people are doing on a daily basis is going to prevent those mistakes from happening, or at least prevent you from being embarrassed, when in reality, you're not making things better because people aren't learning. The next thing we do is we signal to people that we don't trust them because we say things like, I need to be involved in this one. And really, you don't want to prevent all the mistakes. You want people to make mistakes so they can learn. And then you can follow that up with, hey, here's why I thought about you. I thought this might be good for you for these reasons. And that you want to avoid delegating under tight timelines unless somebody is very well trained. But if you just further define what you do as a leader is getting more and more involved at that detailed level, you're going in the right direction. But if you're on this endless mission alongside your people to find out answers that they should be finding out for themselves, you're just going to irritate them. Are we maintaining pace to get this thing done on time? That's supervising. People expect that. But if your calendar is driving you, you're moving backwards. You want to move away from seeing that tasks are getting done to articulating a vision where people decide on what tasks need to be done in the first place. Hi, I'm Mike Targus, retired Marine leadership coach, founder of Center Desk. In this video, I'm going to talk about a subtle but critical trap that we can fall into as leaders. Once we've been in the job for a while, and we start to gain seniority or more responsibility, is we can move backwards in our development as leaders. As we get more senior, we actually get more hands-on. We get more into the details that our people should be handling. And instead of developing ourselves as coaches and influencers, we hang on and we increase our grip on what our people are doing. And this is moving backwards for a few reasons. My core message for this video is that seniority should elevate your leadership. It shouldn't make you tighten your grip on your people. And as you get more senior, your job isn't to get closer to the people doing the work in terms of like getting your hands on the work yourself. It's to enable them to do it better. And as you get more senior, you want to selectively involve yourself in details. And one practical reason for this is that involving yourself in details is a time commitment. It brings a lot of, you can easily overextend yourself, whereas backing up and taking a broader view of things going on, maybe seeing more things, but at a little bit more of a shallow level, you can move from part of the business to part of the business more freely. And you can have more control over how you spend your time. So picture your leadership career as being in the basket of a hot air balloon. When you start out, you're on the ground, and that's all you can see is the things on the ground. But as you start to get experience, you start to become more senior, the balloon starts to lift off, and pretty soon you can see further and further out. You can see less and less of the granular details on the ground until you get to that highest level, senior level, executive possibly, and you can barely see the detail of what's going on the ground, but what you can see for miles in every direction. And that has a whole value in and of itself, which I'm going to talk about in this video. Here's what I mean about moving backward as a leader, which can easily happen. When we mature as leaders, it's not about being better, becoming better at control. It's about being better enablers. It's about being in command of the situation, about being able to see what's coming around the corner, being able to shape the situation for your people. And it's about being able to move around the battlefield, if you will, more freely. Here's a few things we do when we're moving backward as a leader. We're reverting back to control the things that we used to do, the things that we were comfortable with, the things that may have even given us the opportunity to become a manager, become a leader, and start moving up the ranks. And why do we do this? That's our comfort zone. We know how to do it. We felt good when we were doing it. So instead of embracing new things that your people require from you or expect out of you, you fall back and do your old job. A lot of new managers do this. And that aggravates people because they expect you to be doing things as a leader, getting ready for the future, supporting them, not doing the work for them. I mentioned that this happened to me early on in my career, and just to illustrate that a little bit, when a second lieutenant is the lowest officer rank, so you become a officer, and then you go to training as a second lieutenant, and you in the Marine Corps you have about a year's worth of training to be an infantry officer. So then you hit the fleet or you hit your operational unit, you get your first platoon, and what you've been taught is kind of the book solution on how things should be. And what I noticed about 2 years into being in the fleet or being a platoon commander, I had been promoted to first lieutenant. And I remember describing it to myself as becoming overly practical. So you go from knowing the book solution and then being kind of disappointed. Maybe that would equate to graduating college and getting your first job. And then what you do is you kind of go the other direction and you become overly practical. So you throw probably too much of the book solution out and then you rely on just what it takes to get the job done. And as a leader, you got to take it a little bit further than that. You got to pay attention to the example that you're setting for people, and it's important for them to see you doing things the right way. A lot of that is, just kind of went out the window, and then I would say probably a little bit too hands-on at that point. But my assessment of myself at that period of time is that I was doing what I'm talking about now. Is I got a little worse as a leader for a time being. Like in one sense, you're getting some things done, but you're not really progressing. You're not becoming that larger, bigger leader that you need to be. And I did shortly thereafter. I got back on track, but there was a time for there that sticks out in my mind. The next thing we do when we're moving backward is we shift away from coaching and guiding people, and we shift back into inspecting and directing, which is kind of what I did in that example that I just said to you. I think one of the reasons that people do this is the further you advance, the closer you get to more senior leaders. And that can be a pretty stressful situation to be in when you get closer and closer to the executive team. You think in your mind that you can't make mistakes and that your involvement in what people are doing on a daily basis is going to prevent those mistakes from happening, or at least prevent you from being embarrassed, when in reality, you're not making things better because people aren't learning. And just like I did, you go from being kind of this frontline leader, manager, to somebody who is just a little bit overly concerned with the immediate result. And it's really important for people to see you focused on the future, focused on them, focused on the future that they can achieve for themselves and helping them get there. The next thing we do is we signal to people that we don't trust them because we say things like, I need to be involved in this one. Or maybe you don't say that, but by being involved, what you're doing is you're sending a signal to people is you don't trust them to do the work. So it's really important to empathize, to look at yourself through the eyes of others, see what you look like to them. But if you don't believe in any of that, just think of it like this. The more you are willing to do somebody's job for them, eventually they're going to be inclined to just let you do it. So why do we do all these things? Why do we take a step backwards? Well, one reason is loss of familiarity. So like I said, you used to be really good at it as an individual contributor or a junior manager, but now that you're increasing in rank, you don't really have a good feel for where you fit in the organization. Returning to the old details gets that comfort factor back up. What you want to be careful of is not talking to yourself and convincing yourself that it's okay to stay involved in some of the details. And there may be some details that you do want to stay involved in, but more and more, you got to watch, make sure you don't talk yourself in there. A good way to do that is pair up with a peer leader so you can watch each other, make sure that, you keep it on track with the way that you should be developing as a leader. And that's just one of the examples, is getting back to the familiar. Stay away from that. Another reason that we can move backward is we're anxious. We're trying to control our anxiety. We have a fear of mistakes reflecting badly upon us because we're less intimately involved with the actual execution. So you have people doing things that you're not observing quite as closely as you did, so you move closer. And you think that by watching people or even getting involved yourself, you're going to avoid those mistakes. The result is going to be better. But even if a short-term result is better. People don't like working like that. You don't want your boss doing that to you, do you? And really, you don't want to prevent all the mistakes. You want people to make mistakes so they can learn. It's like being a parent. You're not going to bail your kid out of every possible bad situation they could experience. If you do, they're never going to be an adult. And on that note, you probably got to reflect too, though, just like a parent would. Is that really what you want? Do you want people to be dependent on you? And this might be something in your subconscious. You might need to take a look at the way you act and behave around them. And without realizing it, they might be feeding your ego by being reliant upon you. But what you really, your goal as a leader is work yourself out of a lot of jobs. You want to have people able to step up and run things without you, because there's no way to replicate the production of 4, 5, 6, 10 people working under their own power with supervision from you, but not direct involvement. You're not going to be able to drive that kind of output. Identity drift. We used to be this hard charger, individual contributor, manager. People knew us for certain things. We were known for getting a certain type of job done. And now you're a manager, and that's not really the expectation from you. And this is particularly difficult when you're like in the middle management range, because when you're a frontline manager, it's pretty clear that you're there to control what's going on a daily or weekly basis. When you're a senior leader, by that time, you probably got enough experience to know your place, providing and setting the vision for the organization. But in the middle, it's harder. I think a good way to think of it is, what's the difference between a salesperson and a sales manager? Sales manager may not be doing the things that they really loved about getting into sales in the first place. Maybe they are, but the salesperson is out there living the dream. They're making the sale. They're interfacing with clients and customers directly. Maybe when you move into management, not as much. The other reason is status preservation. When you're unfamiliar with your role as a leader, you get yourself into activities where you don't belong. You think that by contributing, you're being valuable. And that's one of my big takeaways for this video is, you don't want to confuse activity with production or contribution. I had to deal with this in a big way during the Iraq deployment. I was a battalion executive officer, or XO. We had about 1,200 guys in the city of Ramadi. And my job was to keep that organization running. So my job wasn't to be out there in the street in firefights every day like the companies were, and they were every day. My job was to make sure they had what they needed to be successful in that environment, make sure we got the wounded guys evacuated out of there. We had to make sure that they had ammunition. We had to make sure their weapons were getting repaired. We had a lot of vehicles that were breaking down or getting blown up. We had to get those things fixed up. That was my job, to make sure all that was working. But those aren't the kind of stories that you hear in Marine Corps training. The Marine Corps training stories are like the war hero kind of things that you may have seen on TV or read in books. That's what you hear a lot about. You don't really hear about the people supporting. But for you, when you're in the middle, when you're maybe a senior manager, or maybe you're getting close to being kind of a low-level executive, it's a lot harder to figure out. I wrote an article about this in the Marine Corps Gazette on my experiences there, and I really wrestled with it. It bothered me through the whole deployment in a lot of ways, and I've since kind of got back and got some feedback on what my role was and what it meant to the organization at reunions and getting back together with guys. So that's really helped a lot. But this could be a really difficult thing for you, when you're in the middle, when you're starting to pick up some more of that responsibility, and it looks a lot less familiar. But you got to stay focused on what value you're providing to the organization. If you don't know that, if it hasn't been told to you, you got to just kind of take a step back and look at it and determine it for yourself. And then you might have poor delegation skills. Maybe you never learned it. Maybe you never saw it done well. But guidance is key to delegation. Is what you're not only just going to tell people what needs to be done, but you're going to guide them. You're going to tell them why it's important, or the intent, and you're going to give them the boundaries of what needs to be done, what resources are available, what the time frame is, what right looks like, what's the quality expectation. These are all things that may not come. These are all things that need to be learned. You need somebody to tell it to you, or you got to observe it. It's really important to be able to delegate. You're not bothering people by telling them what to do. But so the first thing to consider in determining what to delegate is anything that you're not uniquely trained to do, you got to get rid of it. And as you start to get into positions where you're increasing in responsibility, anything routine, you got to think about dumping that off. You got to delegate that out, or maybe it just doesn't need to be done at all. But you can't bog yourself down, most likely, with doing it, especially if you're not trained to do it. That's a real sign of insecurity is if you're not even trained to do something, but you still find the need to get involved, you got a problem. And in addition to like thinking about that in a technical sense, if something doesn't require your experience or judgment, maybe we can include that in that category. Think about getting rid of it, delegate it. Your role is to decide on priorities, resource allocation, setting new priorities, and being involved in difficult situations that your people may need support in handling. The next reason on deciding what to delegate will be developmental opportunities for the people in your team. These are situations that require skills that your people need to develop for the future, or maybe they need to develop them now, they don't have them now. It can be harder, it can take more time to do it this way. You need to have a decent amount of forethought to be able to say, let's give this task to these guys over here. They haven't worked on that before, and we need them to develop that skill. But if you're a self-centered leader, you're not going to see that opportunity come about. And even if it's not something that's blatantly a great training opportunity for somebody, think about stretching the capabilities of your team too. And maybe somebody's not quite cut out right now for something, or maybe it's not even a skill that they need, but can you get something off your plate and delegate that to somebody who might appreciate a challenge? The next what to delegate is time consuming, detailed work. If something takes a high level of effort, but can either be taught to somebody else to do or has low strategic impact, you as a leader, you got to think about delegating. Because if you don't, you're going to get pulled in and you're going to be missing a lot of the time that you should be spending on bigger and better and more important things, things that are important to the whole group. In the Marine Corps, we used to refer to this as becoming decisively engaged. If you remember from the Marine Corps warfighting videos that I did, something that's decisive is that it got an impact larger than itself. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. In this case, it's a bad thing. You may get tied up in a situation and other things, other parts of what the team needs from you are going to suffer. But when you think about teachable work, don't just think about what you can teach somebody or can it be taught just generically. Who on your team can teach one of the newer people or somebody that doesn't have that skill how to do it? That's win-win because not only do you have somebody learning something new, but you're developing leadership abilities in people by having them mentor, coach, teach somebody else on the team. That's a great way to go. That's one of my go-to things when I see a situation and we have new people on a team is who can work with this person and show them how to do it. And you do that enough and the team really starts to take off. Recurring tasks, first of all, if something is happening on a very routine basis and it doesn't require a whole lot of ingenuity, first of all, can you make it into just a checklist that you don't even need to be involved with? Leaders should get these kind of recurring taskings or recurring events organized and get them to where they can run on their own. You want to have somebody in mind to learn how to do the task for you. Similar to pairings one of your vets up with one of the new people, can you develop somebody to take this recurring event over from you? Which is related to the next reason you should consider delegating something. If it's a special project or very discrete executable, clear parameters. The expression here is, hey, Mike, can you take charge of this for me? And then you lay out the requirements of what needs to be done. And this could be something very finite in time, very defined. And people will, if they trust you, if they respect you as their leader, they are going to appreciate you showing the confidence in them to ask them to take charge of something. And then you can follow that up with, hey, here's why I thought about you. I thought this might be good for you for these reasons. The second when to delegate is when there's time enough to learn. And this is a little bit related to what I was saying about pairing people up, having a veteran person teach somebody that's newer on the team. But if you have time where somebody can have a little bit of a learning process, maybe check in with you on the progress, maybe you can coach them along. That's a really good scenario or situation you want to delegate to. And you want to avoid delegating in tight timelines unless somebody is very skilled. And you want to keep in mind that you want to avoid delegating under tight timelines unless somebody is very well trained. If a task is just extremely well defined, if people are used to doing it, Definitely delegate that down. There's nothing worse than seeing a leader that should be doing high level things for the organization, taking care of big problems, but they involve themselves in these low level, mundane tasks. Maybe they think they're even playing it safe by staying with low risk activities, but it's not low risk and it's not playing it safe. Okay, so here are some signs that you're moving backward as a leader. You start to review details that you used to have other people handling. Why would you do this? On a temporary basis, it might be okay. Like if somebody was handling details, they don't know what they're doing, you got to get involved and get it back on track, but then you got to get out of there. But if you just further define what you do as a leader as getting more and more involved at that detailed level, you're going in the wrong direction. Making actual decisions that should be delegated. So this isn't necessarily just delegating tasks, but I'm talking about making decisions. And the one rule of thumb that I've had for quite a while now is if something is a real easy decision to make, if there's little risk of failure or more importantly, like an internal decision, if there's little risk of people being, you know, basically pissed off about it, have somebody else do that. It may not even need to be a manager, but give the easy decisions away. Let other people make those. You keep the hard decisions for yourself. And while this might sound like a risky move that could get you into trouble, what I think you're going to find is if you stick to making the difficult decisions yourself and give the easy ones away, but keep the tough ones for yourself, it's only going to help your reputation as a dependable leader. People are going to respect you for doing that. The next indicator to watch for to make sure you're not moving backward as a leader is that you're not spending more and more time finding out tactical answers instead of setting the intent for the group. Something that you should spend a lot of time on is describing what right looks like. That can be a form of intent. Anything that gives people some latitude to make their own decisions and make decisions on their own, and that doesn't require you to be hovering over them to tell them what to do. But if you're on this endless mission alongside your people to find out answers that they should be finding out for themselves, you're just going to irritate them. A lot of new leaders think that they're showing that they're one of the guys or one of the gals by being shoulder to shoulder, and there is a time to do that. But routinely, if you're doing that, if you're getting in people's business instead of just letting them work, you're going to irritate them. You do, however, need to learn how to supervise, and supervising would be an example of that would be something like if you've directed a project where you want your people to document a certain process, maybe you want to make a value stream map, something like that. You want to check in with them on how it's going. So you're not going to necessarily be down there watching them draw lines and type documents out, but you may have a weekly check in just to see are we done with the first 6 chapters or the first 6 steps? Are we maintaining pace to get this thing done on time? That's supervising, and people expect that. So what you want to do is you want to figure out a way to make sure you're going to get a quality result, but at the same time letting people work. Filling your calendar with meetings, check-ins, recurring, routine things instead of thinking about the future. And this could happen to all of us. It happens to me times too. You get meeting invites that show up, and pretty soon you have a full day. You haven't done really anything to move the team or the organization forward. You got to make time to do that. You got to be proactive and take charge of your time and make sure you're thinking about the future, not just about what's going on. And if you have so many meetings that you can't do that, you got to start looking at what meetings you don't have to go to. You got to start looking at, is the meeting necessary? You got to look at how much time is allocated. Can we do the meeting in less time and things like that? But if your calendar is driving you, you're moving backwards. And then watch yourself for saying things like, I got to stay close to this one. Or the team, they're not ready for this one yet. I got to be involved. It'll get done faster if I just do it myself. These are all negatives. Your intent may be well-meaning, but what you're really doing is two things. You're not, maybe a couple, maybe more than two things. You're not letting people develop the skills to do things for themselves. But I think more important than that is you're sending the signal to somebody that you don't trust them to do the work. And you might say, no, I do. I trust them to do that. Well, then just let them do the work. Do you like it when the boss comes down and says, hey, move over, Mike, I'm going to do this one? No, it's no different than when you're saying that to your people. And then consider every time you step down and get in the weeds, you're depriving somebody of an opportunity to learn. Think of it that way. So what's the right path? I think it would be described as the coaching path, the coaching leadership path. You want to move away from seeing that tasks are getting done to articulating a vision where people decide on what tasks need to be done in the first place. Here's a quick review of how leadership changes the more senior you get. When you're a frontline manager, you are seeing things go down on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. You are involved in what things really look and feel like, what you can see the expressions on people's faces. You're involved in the details as a frontline supervisor or manager. Mid-level is when you start to develop the ability to establish goals. You're more concerned with outcomes for the organization and, supervising progress to get you to that outcome. And then at the senior level, executive level, you're articulating the vision. You are providing that broad description of where the organization is going and why, reinforcing success. You're providing resources to get them there. And probably most important or most pertinent to this video is you're developing that team that you can then trust to execute. For me, this is all the way from back to being a platoon commander. Like I was saying, you're a lieutenant in charge of 30 people. You're out there, you're hiking with them. You got the pack on your back. It's just as heavy as anybody else's. You're helping carry a machine gun. Then you move into being like company commander or battalion staff. And you're still fairly close, but you are more so charged with leading other leaders, supporting the organization, make sure it's successful. And then my final tour was as a battalion commander, where I remember when we deployed to Afghanistan in 2012, I remember thinking a large part of my job was already done, and that was to develop the team that could fight and win in small unit combat in Afghanistan, which is squad level, groups of 10, 12, 13 guys. And we trained that way. In fact, 50% of our training was dedicated to bringing people up and making sure they knew how to do that. 50% of the training was planned by the non-commissioned officers. And the way it was explained to me when I was deployed was make sure that you tour the different positions, talking to your guys and making sure that they understand your intent. That was exactly how it was explained to me. Do they know what you expect of them? Do they know the purpose of the deployment and the operation that they're currently in? And the Marine Corps expression is everybody wants to be a squad leader. You want to be down with that group of 10 guys doing the fighting, seeing things for yourself. And as you get more senior, you just can't do that. Other things are expected of you. So that's it. If you think this video would help somebody, please forward it on to them. If you think I can help you, my contact information is in the profile. And I'll leave you with a couple thoughts. Don't mistake involvement for leadership. Activity is not leadership. Activity is not progress. Be purposeful about who you spend your time with and what you're talking about. And the second one is the real art of leadership is knowing how to pull back without disengaging from your people. Know how to fulfill that larger purpose for your organization without losing touch with reality.